whenever I hear somebody describe my career, I always worry that it sounds like I can't hold the job, because I jumped around a lot. I've been working at Google now for about 7 years, which is the longest I've ever worked anywhere. And I think we'll go through and we'll talk about Google, and I'll talk about some of the cultural things and some of the things that really want me to stay, give me reason to stay, and I think gives a reason for a lot of my colleagues to stay as well. And that's kind of what we're going to do and talk through here today. I've been at Google 7 years. My first 6 years, I was in an organization called People Operations, which is kind of like, we like to term it kind of HR with math, because at Google, it's such an engineering-driven culture that we knew that we couldn't be credible with our leaders and with employees if we weren't analytical and data-driven in the way we thought about issues that we were dealing with them. So I did that for 6 years. I led the staffing organization. I was the lead business partner for the for the global business organization at one point. I did all of the last year and a half, 2 years in that role. I was doing all of our M&A, all of our acquisitions, including the Motorola one, which was our biggest one to date. And then about a year ago, I switched into a new role in security, kind of global security operations. I just found it. I was looking to do something different. Google kind of embraces that, people that want to go and do different things. And it just looked like a real fun opportunity. It kind of linked back to my foreign policy days, because it's a lot of international stuff that I'm dealing with. And I won't be talking too much about that for one, for obvious reasons, and two, because this is more about the culture of innovation that we want to talk about. So that's where I wanted to go and talk today. So we'll just walk through some slides, and then hopefully we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A if people have them. So a little background. I know Deborah did a great job of kind of highlighting some of the stuff, both about Google and then just about the culture in Silicon Valley. I think she really nailed some of the most important factors that I'll hit on as examples of things that she talked about more generally about the Valley. I'll give examples from Google about how we've tried to do some of the things that she referred to. First, 1998, this is Larry and Sergey. They started the company at Stanford, as we heard, and then moved into this garage in somebody's house. And so that was 98. And 16 years later, we now have 50,000 Googlers. We call people who work at Google Googlers, and we have 50,000. We're more than 70 offices in more than 40 countries, and that continues to grow as we kind of move into new markets. And kind of, we're big believers in that you need to develop our products need to be the end user focus, and to do that, we feel like we need to be in different markets so that we understand the cultures of those markets, and we're designing products, tweaking those products to make them attractive to people in those cultures, in those countries. You can also see, I think we'll talk a bit about later, the reasons for some of this. I think some of the photos I have up here are photos related to the way our office looks. We have a real fun, quirky environment. We have slides, as you can see, micro kitchens, pool tables, play areas, the atmosphere tries to make as fun as possible, because we really believe that drives innovation, and we'll talk about why we think that a little later as we go here. Can I ask if you can throw my notes up there as well? I know I had a couple of notes and I'm not seeing them, but if you can. Okay, thanks. What I'm seeing is the next slide, which is fine as well, so I'm just going to stumble anyway. So I think one of the things that's really important to draw out when we start thinking about Google is the very first thing is our founders, Larry and Sergey, really had an understanding of what their mission was, what they wanted Google to be. And 16 years later, that mission, to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, is still the mission. I know I've worked at a lot of companies, and over time, you use a lot of keywords. You talk about leadership, you talk about innovation, and those are kind of your mission statement type things. And here they just kind of laid out the statement, and when you think about everything we do as a company, it usually falls back to this statement about how do we get information, make it accessible to people and useful. And when we think about that, some of the big ways we do that is, we have 3 billion searches a day now. 750 million users are using Chrome, and Chrome is probably about 4 or 5 years old now. So just the scale. YouTube, 4 million hours of footage are watched each month. Most of that are cat videos, apparently. Seems that way anyway. And then Android, again, a product that we really launched, I think 3 or 4 years ago now. started with a small group of about 7 people. Everyone thought it was a crazy idea to do what they did. It's now obviously the biggest phone system, and we have 1.5 million activations a day. If you look at those 4 things, they're all about information and how do I make it accessible. And then you look at all the other things we've done or that we continue to do, and we'll talk about some of them. That's really what it's about. It's really about how do I just get it out there? How do I bring it together? Is there any way to make parts of the world that don't have access to the internet get them access? We're always thinking about those things. And I think it's just it's a really inspiring place to work for that regard. That's why I think we're able to attract a lot of really passionate people because we have this kind of focus on kind of drawing towards that and finding solutions. One of the other interesting things I think that's good to look at, I'm sorry, it's here now, it was my mistake. So now I see where I'm supposed to look. So, if you read our founders' letter, our IPO letter, and when we went our IPO in 2004, they wrote a letter and to potential shareholders. And I thought that first sentence was probably was the most powerful piece. It said, we're not a conventional company, and we don't intend to become one. And what they were trying to say in that, and they actually said it a little more explicitly at the time, is if you're looking for us just to invest in incremental growth and to make sure we got this great kind of, we've created this new mousetrap of search, and we're just going to make it better and better going forward. If that's what you're looking for as an investor, that's not us. We're going to take some shots. We're going to spend some money on crazy ideas, on things that aren't going to make money, probably have no potential revenue stream, but we just think are really cool, or we just think can really help some problem that the world's having. And it sounds kind of corny and it sounds kind of cliche, but when you sit there every day and you see it and you hear the leadership talk about it and you're part of those meetings and those discussions when we're talking about new products, it's very rare to be in a meeting where any part of the discussion early on a product is, how are we going to make money on this? What's the revenue angle to this product? It really is about, yeah, that's really cool. I can see why you'd want to do something like that. And that's a pretty good feeling to have, again, when you're in a company like that, because it allows you to think about those things. It allows you to think big. Because we really believe that kind of innovation is going to provide us with not just delightful gadgetry, the little cool things you can do, but actual solutions to our problems, and kind of, as Larry likes to say, inspirations for our dreams. I mean, he really believes a lot of that stuff and talks about it internally and kind of drives it. So, as Deborah talked about, the importance of a leader who really talks about these things and sets the agenda and sets the tone for the company is really, really important, and that's kind of what we have. I want to talk about some of the engagement tools we use to kind of help people feel like they're part of the company, to bring them and make them part of the company, and then we believe all of these innovation tools really help drive that innovation that we're so focused on. I mean, it's the biggest thing we're concerned about is how do we continue to innovate, because we believe that you can wake up in the morning and decide that you're going to use a different search engine. It's not like you're stuck with the search engine you paid for it, you're locked in. Every morning you get up and you say, I'm going to search for something, and you make a choice. And if we violate your trust, if we do any kind of thing that doesn't get us there, we're not as innovative as the next guy, you're going to find somewhere else to go and do that search. And we're very, very aware of that. And so we're really, really focused on those key things. I want to focus on the first two right now, think and act like an owner, and culture of audience participation. There's a number of ways we do that. I think one of the most interesting things we do is, again, every other company I've worked at, the CEO, the leaders of the company, maybe once a year, maybe once every 6 months, if you're really lucky, maybe once a quarter, the CEO would get up in front of the company and talk to the organization about kind of how you've just done for the last quarter or last 6 months or last year, and kind of lay out in general terms the plan forward. Larry and Sergey, from the very beginning of the company, set up a meeting. We call it TGIF. We moved it to Thursdays because of the time zones, but it's still TGIF. We didn't change the T. And what it is every Thursday afternoon, we all assemble on campus. There's beers and food and all kinds of stuff. And these guys get up on stage, just like this, and they talk about new products. They talk about things we're doing. Sometimes they show something new. It's a real fun environment. The new people get hired, we call them Nooglers. As you can see the theme, Googlers, Nooglers. Gaglers is our LGBT group. And when you're a noogler, your first TGIF, they give you a beanie. It's a multicolored beanie with a little propeller on the top. And you wear that to that meeting, and they introduce, and they talk, and everyone has to stand up, and people cheer. And then we show this around the world live, and then clearly you can watch the next day if you're in a time zone that doesn't work for the live. But they get up and they do this every week, and they bring other leaders on to talk about issues. And then they have a Q&A. And the lead up to the Q&A, it's fascinating. We have a system, an online system, where you can put in questions that you want to see asked. And then people see what all the questions are, and people vote on the questions. So you put a question in there, you think it's a good question, you give it a thumbs up. And the votes that get the most thumbs up, or the questions that get the most thumbs up, are the lead questions at the TGIF each week. And these questions are incredibly difficult. They're hard-hitting. They're asking questions. They're challenging decisions that are made. Why did you do this? Why did you pull out of China when we did that? Very, very high-level debates, very heated. People get up, disagree at the microphones. And you're sitting there in the meeting. Well, the first time I went to this thing, and I come from politics where you wouldn't challenge like that, your leader type thing. And it was just this unbelievable atmosphere. And Larry and Sergey, the give and take with the people in the audience, it was very respectful, very fun, but there was this kind of this engagement that they had with employees. And it was an attitude of, we're all in this together, and we're going to share everything with you. We'll talk about everything. We'll talk about decisions. Ultimately, as a leader, we have to make the call, but we want to hear what you think. And it happens every week, and it still does. And it's just a really cool thing to see. And it's one of those things when we talk about all the free food and all the stuff we do at Google, it's those things that really drive the culture, and they cost nothing, right? So when I get asked a lot of times, yeah, sure, you can afford it, you're doing so well as a company, but I say, yeah, but these are the things that really drive the culture over here. That stuff certainly helps, but it's those tones that are set that are really the important thing for us as a company. And so the TGIF, just a lot of fun. Everyone looks forward to it for those reasons. The other one is, we've got a bunch of them up here, little things. We fix it. There's an attitude at Google that if something's broken and you notice it, then you have a responsibility to do something about it. You either fix it yourself or find the person who can. An example, just a few weeks ago, I was walking by something. I noticed there was a map on a building laying out where the rooms were on that floor. And they had done some renovations, and I realized the room that I was supposed to be at was no longer there and was moved. And it was just the map was wrong. And it was kind of one of those things where I remarked to my buddy who was with me, I said, I got the map wrong. And he immediately said, you should file a fix-it ticket and file a gut ticket. And sure enough, we got to founder meeting, and the first thing we did was we called it up, put a little thing in there, and I walked by a few days later, and they had put up the right map. And it's kind of a goofy example, but it's kind of it's the tone that we all kind of feel like we own this company. Larry and Sergey also, and our CEO now, our chairman, every quarter, they present the same presentation that they do to the board, they present to the employees. So they share it, they share all the details. The only thing they take out is the forward projection numbers, the financial numbers. But in terms of the strategy, again, they share it. And there's an expectation that we're going to share this with you, and we expect it not to leak. We expect you not to tell folks what you're hearing here. And it doesn't, which is always amazing. Again, coming from my political background, it amazes me that there are so few leaks that happen at Google. I mean, we had the Google Plus, our social product, the G Plus up there. We were using it for, I think, 4 or 5 months. You got 40, 50,000 employees. We had all of our summer interns, 3,000, 4,000 of them, and we were all using Google Plus. And it didn't leak at all. When the announcement came out that Google was releasing this new product, the market had never heard about it. It was just something that we all recognized the importance of that, and that's where we were going to manage it. We encourage things. People feel very comfortable writing Larry an email. It's just something you do. So people feel that they have that access because he kind of creates that culture. And there's a few others up here. We do a lot of surveys of employees. I think a lot of it's just a basic engineering kind of culture. Engineering has that feedback loop in engineering systems. And Larry and Sergey have that same thing in the way they like to hear about things. So there's an expectation that you're always going to be feeding back what you're thinking of things. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. The next one, think big, take risks, and invent solutions that aren't yet possible. So these are two that I'd like to really focus on here. I think we talk about it Larry talks about it as a healthy disregard for the impossible. So we really want to do stuff, we call them moonshots, which is why I put that moon in there. I thought I was being really creative. These are big ideas that we just kind of go for. They sound crazy, and as you describe them, they're crazy. And then over time, they sound less crazy, which is always interesting. And the 4 examples here, the one on the top left there is the self-driving car that we just came out with a couple of weeks ago now, I think. It doesn't even have a steering wheel. You get in, you program where you want to go, and it takes you. It's kind of, people say, it's crazy, why are you doing this? What is it? 1.2 million people die a year in car accidents. And almost all of them are a result of somebody being a bad driver, making mistakes. So this is an effort to kind of figure out, is there a way to just systematize this and make this process better? And I've been in these cars, and it's just phenomenal how they work. You sit there and you see a screen, and it shows you everything because of the way the computers work and the thing on the roof. It can tell you everyone who's around for 50 yards, who's going what speeds, what's happening, so it's just anticipating everything that's going on. And it's just this really cool thing that you could really only do with supercomputers, incredible amounts of data, the amount of data that this thing is accumulating every second to make all of those key decisions like you would as a driver. But again, one of those things that rallies people, we got some of the world's best engineers who came to Google because they wanted to work on stuff like this. And so, one, we think it's game-changing for the world, but we also think it's showing everyone that we have this kind of cool culture that this is what we're going to be doing here. Come on over and be part of it. So I think that's really important. The balloon is a project called Loon, and this is an experimental technology for balloon-powered internet access. So struck on the idea of there are parts of the world that don't have internet, and very hard to get them, the cabling and all the stuff to get them internet. So somebody struck on the idea of what if you attached internet access kind of on the bottom of a balloon, threw it up in the atmosphere, and it just floated on its own, but you ride the air currents the right way, it could go over parts of the world that don't have internet. So we're piloting this, it's going extremely well. And you can imagine it being for helping people get access to information in Africa, in parts of Africa where they don't have internet, in emergencies and disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, those kind of things. You can get these things up pretty quick and get the internet working again. So those types of things, again, kind of this crazy idea, but when it came out, nobody said, that's crazy, get out of here, we don't want to talk about it. It was kind of like, see if we can make that happen. That'd be really cool. I want to put a few people on it and run with it. And that's kind of what happened there. Google Glass, I think Sergey's up there wearing Google Glass. The other one, the contact lens. This is a smart contact lens that can measure, it's got a chip in it, and it measures glucose in your eye, in your tears. And then it can send that information to a computer, so if you have diabetes, for example, you never have to prick your finger again to see your blood count and your blood levels. It'll just do that through your contact lenses. So again, something really kind of funky that somebody thought of. I think Larry had heard about it, or Sergey had heard about it, and they kind of went and they found the guy who was trying to do this and said, hey, we got access to all of this information. You can, these huge supercomputers to help you think it through. We can help you scale this, which is also attractive to a lot of small startups and small companies. When Google comes knocking at the door, is a lot of times they're saying to us, I think my idea is so good, I want to scale it to the whole world, and I certainly can't do that the way Google can help me do that. Wow. There was a little of that beef last night, I think. Sorry about that. I think one of the things that we talk about and Larry talks about is all of these projects, and then at the same time, we're not losing focus on the key things, the search and the other things we're doing. But one of the things Larry talks about is he wants there to be a 10x. He's always talking about 10x. And I think what he means by that is, for most companies, it's always about 10% incremental growth on what you're doing. Let's make our product 10% better. And if we can make it 10% better this year and then the next year, that kind of thing. And Larry's view is if you're doing that, you're doing the same thing as everybody else. He says you probably won't fail spectacularly, but you'll never succeed wildly. And that's the kind of the way he likes us to think. So there's this big emphasis on kind of 10x. And he also believes that Google is probably doing 0.1% of the stuff that's happening in the tech space right now. The tech industry is probably doing about 1%. And he said, so there's 99% out there that's kind of virgin space that there are just so many great ideas that we could do to make the world better. And that's kind of where he's driving. And he talks about that. And people talk about that at the company, which is, again, another real inspirational thing. And the last one, I think, is failure's okay. So I want to talk about this one a bit and a couple other things. Just be sure to learn from it. And so on the original I had, it was GIFs, and these little guys over here were move their hands and scream, but it didn't work on this PowerPoint I had. So, but allow for mistakes. And not only allow for mistakes, celebrate mistakes. And that's something we do. So I think, I've seen people who are on a project and the project doesn't work, it never gets launched, or it gets launched and it gets real bad reaction and it fails. I've been at these TGIFs where Larry's called that team on the stage, they've given them an award, the financial reward, they recognize them, they say, you guys did phenomenal work, it just isn't working right now, it's not something that the market may want, but you developed some new technologies that we're going to use somewhere else. It's going to help drive some of our other things that we're doing. And there's this embracing of that kind of failure. I remember being in a meeting where somebody came in and was pitching to Larry and Sergey. They wanted to do something. It was going to cost quite a bit of money to try this new idea. And they looked at each other, and Sergey said, you know what, just go for it. But just promise me one thing, because it's a lot of money. If you're going to fail as fast as you can. That was kind of the, and that's kind of, so you're in a room when you hear that. I mean, I think if you look at most companies and talk about the importance of making mistakes, I think a lot of companies talk about that. But when you look around a lot of times, you don't find those people with the company anymore, right? I think they're not there. I think at our company, it's kind of a badge of honor to be on something that you really was deemed internally like, wow, that was a big effort. It didn't work, but it was a big effort. As a matter of fact, I think if you set your goals for the quarter, for the year, and if you nail your goals, Larry's view would be you didn't set them high enough, because not everyone should hit 100% of their targets for a given year. And that's kind of a mentality that we go through there. The middle one there, make product development everyone's job, and it's the dog food. We call it dog fooding. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with this term. I wasn't before I moved to Silicon Valley. What dog fooding is, I guess there was a CEO of a company who thought his dog food that he was developing was fantastic, and he went around, and what he would do to show how good this dog food was, he would actually eat it. So he said, I'll eat the dog food that I'm making for dogs because I think that's how good the product is. And so it's kind of come this lingo, I think, in Silicon Valley, is that you dog food products. You use them yourself before you launch them. So I use the example of Google+. We used it for 4 or 5 months before it was launched. It wasn't just that we were using it. There was an expectation on all of us to provide our feedback. So to write in and say, this didn't work for me. Have you thought about doing this? And we make it really easy to do that on all of our products, especially the ones we're piloting in-house. And we just make that loop, that we close that loop, and we set the expectation that you have an obligation as an employee to give us that feedback. And that drives the change that's going forward. And when I first started, I thought, yeah, I'm not an engineer though, so it's not as important for me to give that feedback on the dog foods as others. And the response I got was, no, it's actually more important, because you're more like the average user out there. It's can my mother use the product? It's not can my cousin or my nephew who's an engineer use the product. That's kind of the difference. So there's a real emphasis on doing that. So everyone feels part of it. And it goes from the products all the way towards the culture. We do surveys. We're always questioning people about, are you happy here? Do you still feel like Google's an innovative company? Has that dropped? And we check as we look each year at this major survey we do once a year. Have the results dropped? Where do we need to pick up some things? All of that stuff is we're constantly asking those questions, because, again, it's just our biggest fear that we're gonna miss something and not be innovative. And then the last one, institutionalize the practice of innovation. I guess the best example at Google is a 20% time. 20% time is something that Larry and Sergey came up with early on, where any employee can just put up their hand and say, I'm going to work on a 20% project. 20% of my work life, I'm going to go off and do something that's unrelated to my job, it's unrelated to my performance, it's just something I want to work on, and I think it's a cool idea. And so it kind of sets the tone for everyone that your innovation is something that's kind of expected at all levels. And I think we've seen a lot of examples of things that were 20% projects that turned out to be huge successes. Gmail is probably the biggest one. So it was a few engineers sitting around over lunch saying, we could do a better email than what's out there. Why don't we go and do that? And they worked on it on their own, and then they brought it forward and said, look what we've done. And all of a sudden, everyone was kind of, let's drive this, let's make it work. And so internally, there's a site you can go to where you post ideas, just like the questions. You post ideas, wouldn't it be cool if kind of thing. And then people will vote on what they think, if they think you have a good idea, or they'll just give you a thumbs up, and then people will volunteer stuff that says, I'm in this part of the organization, I can help you think through this piece of that problem you're trying to solve. I'll give you my 20% time, and I'll spend a day a week with you working on it. And so you get that kind of thing. So the picture I have here with that is, I don't know if anybody's used Google Sky. It's a product. It was a couple of engineers, so it was just like Google Earth, where you can see all of what's going on the ground. Somebody said, wouldn't it be cool if we could turn the phone up towards the sky and see the same thing? And so Google Sky, you can download it on your phone. It basically is, if you turn it up in the sky, it just looks like you're looking through your phone, but it's identifying all the stars you're looking at. And as you move your phone across the sky, it moves also, your phone moves, and it's telling you what you're looking at as well. So during the day, you can point it to the ground and see where the sun is, or during the night when it's dark, you can see where the sun is, even by pointing it downwards. Just this really cool product. When you're out kind of camping or out on a nice night, you can actually see what you're looking at. Again, we're not going to drive revenue from it. It's not something we're going to put ads to. It's just something that engineers thought was really cool, and they went and did it. So that's the other one, and I forgot this thing. Okay, so this I want to talk a bit about 4 big things we do to kind of be agile, respond to opportunities, because we think it's really key that you're ready to go. The first one is creating as much structure as necessary. Create only as much structure as necessary. We're a pretty non-hierarchical company. We try and keep it very flat. We don't have a million layers between the most junior person and Larry. We try and keep it a very, very small amount. And our view is we don't even have job roles that are clearly defined. So a lot of the process that we go through in the hiring process is really about finding people who are comfortable with that ambiguity. Finding people who are comfortable not coming in knowing everything you're going to be doing and what your exact job is going to be. And that's difficult for a lot of people. So we spend a lot of time in our interviewing process really trying to drive that. We try and minimize the hierarchy. That's the TGIF. Anybody feels that they can get up and ask Larry a question, they'll ask any of the leaders a question. They're very accessible. They make it very accessible. And they've continued to do that in a culture of 50,000 employees, which is pretty amazing to see. We also kind of create physical spaces, shared offices. So it's very common to see, Larry and Sergey share an office. It's very common to see leaders and then everyone else sharing their space. So at certain levels, you may get an office of your own, but the common thing to do then is to very quickly turn around and say to people on your team, hey, come on in and join me, set up your office in here as well. And then you've got a fun space, and it's that creative space. Again, it's part of the culture to see people crammed in offices together, and it kind of drives that feeling. So we design our spaces to kind of encourage that interaction. And we'll talk a little bit of that as well in the next slide, actually. So we call it creating space for casual collisions. And this is these are just some of our offices. And if you look, there's space here in the bottom right, the lunch, there's the cafe here on the left, or a micro kitchen. So we have micro kitchens at Google. I'll give for those who aren't aware, we have, on the Mountain View campus, we have over 30 cafes. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner is all free, and the food's fantastic. And the goal of that is that's where you're going to go and you're going to meet people. You're going to sit down at a long table and have lunch with people you don't know. That's where innovation is going to happen. That's where ideas are going to be shared. That's where it's not going to be, hey, from 10 to 11, let's meet in the boardroom and innovate. That's not where it's going to happen. So we're really big on that's what the food's all about, and that free food is really for that. And it's the same. You're never more than 150 feet from a micro kitchen, which is stocked with foods and fruits, vegetables, some snacks, all kinds of drinks, coffee, and then usually there's a pool table or there's some kind of lounge area kind of to it. And again, it's all because that's where people are going to be talking instead of sitting at their desk. You're standing there making a coffee and you end up having a conversation with the person next to you. And again, that's where you're going to exchange ideas. that you might not even have known they had that stuff that you could work with them on. So that's kind of the one thing. It's not about passion. We like to say it's about passion. It's not about the perks. So we have lots of perks, massages and laundry rooms and dry cleaning and haircut places and all the food and then all of these other things. But really, that's just there to kind of create this fun environment, make it easy for people to kind of get that stuff done. We're really big believers in that. We're really big believers that more and more the employee, the world of work is going towards, and especially certainly, and I realize when I talk about this, I'm talking about kind of a certain segment of the population, but the segment of the population that we're after to be the top engineers and stuff, these are people that no longer, the younger generation, they no longer want to separate their personal life outside of work with their job at work. I mean, I remember, one of my first jobs, you were this person outside of work with your friends, you came to work and you were very different. You had a suit and you carried yourself very differently. And I think more and more people today are saying, it's not what I want to be the same person. I want people in the office to know who I am outside the office, that kind of thing. So we've kind of embraced that. And it actually makes it more fun. I mean, Larry talks about, he said, when I'm standing in line getting food at a cafe, I want to turn to the next person next to me, and I want them to be interesting, and I want to know what they're passionate about, and it doesn't necessarily mean what they do at Google. That's probably the second thing I want to see. I just want to meet really cool, fun people and interesting people. And that's kind of what we're trying to gain. And so we encourage people to come in and bring their whole self, we call it, to the organization. And it's, again, sounds a little kind of cliche or kind of cheesy, but the example I give is a few years ago, the last World Cup, I was hosting some executives from a pharmaceutical company who would come in to talk and see Google's culture. And so we were in this conference room having this conversation. It was early in the morning, and every once in a while during the meeting, this huge cheer would go up from outside the meeting. And so they finally stopped and they said, "What's going on?" And I just said, "Oh, it's the World Cup," and because it was the US and the West Coast, the game started at 6 a.m. and went till about 2 p.m. was all the games for that day during the World Cup. And I said, "We've set up TVs on every floor in all the buildings, in the lounge area, so people can watch the games." And people would get in there at 6 and they'd sit there till 2 with their laptops watching the game and obviously cheering. And I remember one of the guys said, "At our company, we cut off access to the internet because we didn't want people checking the scores. We wanted them to work." And I just said, that's probably the difference here that we're talking about. That's hard for us when they come and want to talk about our culture. If you're starting at that, if that's your starting spot, there's a huge difference. And I said to the guy, the challenge for you guys is, if I'm coming out of university, I know where I'm going to want to work as a result of just that description right there, right? And I think that is kind of where it's going in the future. So we encourage people to update their Facebook or do their banking. If you want to go to the gym in the middle of the day, we don't care. You sit there with your manager at the beginning of the quarter, you say, "Here's my goals for the quarter," you set out together what you're trying to accomplish, and then we trust that you're going to be able to go and do it, and that you're not going to be hand-holding. You're going to come if you need help, but you're going to do your thing. And I think we look for that when we're hiring, and we think the people that want to be part of that are the ones that end up being really successful for us. All right. I just want to make sure I'm capturing all these things. The next one was provide the raw materials. Again, something that I found pretty unique to our company. In every building, or in every clump of buildings on our campus, because our campus is getting so big now, we have what we call a tech stop. And that really is kind of like a little computer center where you can go in, you need a new mouse, you just go in, you scan your badge, and with mouses now you don't even need to, you just go in and grab one off the shelf, and on you go. If you're having computer problems, you go in there and they can help you with your computer. If they can't fix it, they'll just give you a new computer until they fix your computer. So it's all just to make it easy for employees. So provide those raw materials, just make it easy. Some of that is the dry cleaning and the laundry and stuff. That just makes it easy for employees. It's the little things you're trying to take away from them so that they can just kind of be excited to be there and be innovative, is the way we look at it. We also make sure there's servers available for engineers so that there's always space on servers that if they have an idea to do something, they don't have to go in through this huge bureaucracy about finding space, that they can test something they're looking at testing. So just making those little things help. Is it easy to meet over lunch? Is it easy to just sit down and talk to somebody about something you're working through? That's the stuff we're thinking about in my new group, which is part of the real estate group. That's kind of the stuff we're thinking about as we kind of work on some of those things. Because we just think these small pieces of infrastructure just they lower the barriers for people to kind of be innovative and create new things. Managers, make managers resources, not bosses. So a big emphasis for us is kind of your team doesn't work for you, you work for your team. So as a manager, it's really about how do I knock down barriers for them? How do I go and get things for them that they need help with, if they need help? Where am I there to help them think through problems? But it's not this kind of driven where they work for me and I'm going to drive them. We kind of flip that a bit, and it works. So we believe that kind of the new managers at work, they do that because at Google, there's also an expectation that the manager is also going to be part of solving the problem and be innovative. So I think Deborah talked about the younger, more junior people in the office coming up with the big idea at NetApp. That's something we look for. Larry often believes that the best people to solve the problem are probably the youngest people in the room. When we were going through Google+, I was responsible for our summer intern program, and at the time there was somebody saying, we don't want to give access to the interns to our new product that we haven't launched yet because we think it'll leak. My point was, these are the exact, university students are the exact people we want using this product and trying it and helping us develop it. And Larry bought into that as well, because he's a big believer in, stop and listen to the most junior person in the room if you're thinking about hierarchy, because they're going to be the ones that are going to come up with something really creative. And so the managers, to get credibility at Google as a manager, you have to be showing that you can be innovative as well and that you're part of the design. So as a manager, you're really rolling up your sleeves and getting stuff done as well. The next one is hire people who are good at many things. It's a big thing we look for when we're hiring is that people that are comfortable with ambiguity, who have a passion, not just that have passion. So I used it earlier as well, but it's just people that are excited about something, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be computers, but it could be hiking, it could be all of those things. Larry's really big believer in the hiring process. We received well over 2 million applications last year for 4,000 jobs. And every one of them gets reviewed. We have a huge recruiting team because of that. And what's fascinating about it is, since the beginning that Google started, Larry has personally read the interview packet, the resume, kind of the notes from how the interview went of everybody who's ever been hired at Google. So he does the final approval, and he still does it. So I used to, when my old job, would send him a note on Tuesdays. Larry, here are the 200 people we want to hire this week. Here's a list of them. Here's some general things you want to know about them. And then here's all the packets if you want to open them up and look at them. He did. He didn't look at all of them because we started understanding what he was looking for. But we would call out things to him that we knew he liked to look at or the things he liked to see. And a lot of that was the passion stuff, because by the time you get to that part of the process, we're pretty sure you're smart enough, which we look at, that we look at cognitive ability, we look at role-related knowledge, so how the job you're applying for, and then we spend a lot of time on leadership and what we call googliness, and that's really how are they going to fit in the culture? Are they comfortable with ambiguity? We call it an airport test. If I'm snowed in at the airport for 8 hours with this guy, am I going to go crazy, or is it going to be a fun 8 hours, right? That's kind of something we really look for in the interview process as well. And so we would, I'd write Larry this note, and I'd say, check out this candidate over here. Really interesting thing about him is he did this or that. I remember one example, somebody was a hot tamale eating contest winner. And there was a video on YouTube of this guy chugging down hot tamales in a contest. And I linked to the video, and when I sent it to Larry, and he watched it, and he thought it was hilarious, right? So he's still engaged in that. And it's when he became the CEO about 2 years ago, I remember him saying, should I continue to review all the applications or all the final candidates? He said, I'm not going to have the time I did as CEO. And we made the point, it's really important for the culture. You're sending a message that you care, that you want this culture to stay the same and be consistent. We can work on ways to make that process easier, which is what we did in terms of the way we presented stuff to him, and we kind of spend a lot of time trying to calibrate to what we think he would think and what our leaders think. But we've been able to maintain it. And he still looks, and you still get notes back from him saying, hey, candidate 42, you didn't really clarify this question in the thing. Can you go back and ask again, type thing. And you see that regularly. It's not uncommon to have that happen. So, and a big thing is we look for people who've been innovative in their previous jobs, and it could be in their educational pursuits, it could be in their kind of extracurricular activities. And we have big plans for people. So when we're hiring you, we're not hiring you for the job you're coming into necessarily. We're thinking, what's the ability of this person to do something after they do this job? So we look for that. Yeah, we're comfortable they can do this job. And then a lot of the interview is really, can we throw somebody else? Can we throw a problem at them? Can we throw them on something they've never experienced before? So my story is a typical Google story, I think. I joined the equivalent of our HR organization. I'd never worked in HR in my life. Had no HR experience, but somebody saw something and they were willing to take a chance. And now I'm doing the security stuff. Again, never had done it, had some small tangential links to it, but again, it's one of those things where they just want people who are excited about taking on different tasks and different things. And so, that's kind of how I've done it. And then the last piece, we hire people who think like owners. So we share so much information. We want you to think like an owner. We want you to think, there's a problem, how do I solve it? And not kind of sit back and think somebody else will solve it. And this I think is the last slide, actually. We believe if you give people freedom, they'll amaze you. It's a big thing for us. I think freedom is free. A lot of what we do costs nothing. I talked about earlier as well. And we just feel that the whole thing about doing when you go to the gym when you want, do what you want, come into the office when you want. If you're somebody who likes a little more sleep in the morning, you're not a morning person, nobody's going to question if you come in a little later. I typically start my day at the office at 10 o'clock. I won't usually have meetings before 10. I get up early, check emails, do a bunch of work in the morning, and then I have 3 young kids. So they get up, spend time with them, I get them to school, and then I get to the office. And Silicon Valley traffic is pretty bad, so I kind of time it. So I'm usually in the car ready to go to the office around 9:30, and I'm at my desk by 10. I've never had that anywhere else I've ever worked. It's just, we believe that you have the technologies to make that work, that quality of life piece. So, I'm home for dinner with my kids every night. I work long hours. I'll work long hours at night when they're asleep. But we can use the technologies to kind of make sure we're carving out the kind of life we want. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with people as well. And so we believe just kind of create this infrastructure that we've talked a lot about and just get out of the way after that and see what happens. I think there's no real model of innovation. It's not like this is the only way to do it. Ours is the only way. I recognize that Google's a pretty unique spot in the world right now. I mean, we hit, these guys, figured out a new mousetrap that brings us billions and billions of dollars every quarter. And that's pretty unique, and we recognize that. And we recognize that we're the shiny penny still. We're that place, the best place in the world to work. That's not going to be there forever, but we're there right now. And so we're able to go and really, really picky on the types of people we want to bring in, and we really feel that helps drive the culture as well. So we're looking for specific things. So we just want to create that environment to allow all of that innovation kind of to happen. So I'll stop there, and I'll love to answer some questions, because I think that's usually the most interesting part of this. So let's see what we got. Oh, this was a church. Somebody sent me that. So. All right. Okay.